copies of a text called the Book of Enoch, which greatly expands on the story of the Great Flood.
The Book of Enoch is about these angels who are described as watchers, and it was said that 200 of their number come down from heaven, and they took mortal wives who begat offspring, and these offspring were of giant nature, and they were referred to as the Nephilim. And these Nephilim ran amok. It was said that they drank blood, they caused battles and wars.
According to the Book of Enoch, the Nephilim were guilty of horrific crimes, including slaughtering humans and feasting on their flesh. God ultimately decides the earth must be cleansed.
One of the differences is that in the Book of Enoch, the flood washes away the Nephilim, as opposed to the traditional flood story, which washes away people who have been rebellious and sinful.
You've got to wonder what was really going on. Are extraterrestrials coming and now breeding with humans, which was somehow forbidden and wrong, but they did it anyway? And so the other extraterrestrials decided this is a big mistake. Now we've got to destroy all these people.
According to the ancient astronaut theory, the realm of the angels was some type of a spaceship that was orbiting the Earth, and the angels most certainly were not angels. The idea is that the extraterrestrials, in the end, are looking out for our survival. They're not interested in killing us, so this is why some people were, quote-unquote, safe. For ancient astronaut theorists like me, the disasters featured on our countdown not only provide evidence of an alien connection, but also suggest extraterrestrials have played a greater role in the history of our planet than ever imagined. Perhaps as we continue to study these devastating events, from deadly plagues to nuclear meltdowns and asteroid impacts, the truth will finally be revealed. We are not alone. We have never been alone.
It is the world's first known civilization, and also its most mysterious.
What's remarkable about the Sumerians is they invent the wheel, they invent mathematics, they invent writing, but we don't know where they came from or who they were.
The Sumerians are credited with dozens of innovations that are essential to modern society.
We live with the legacy pioneered by the Sumerian civilization.
And they claim that it was all made possible by beings who came down from the sky.
These gods coming to Earth, they gave them gifts, they gave them knowledge.
Could it be that the ancient Sumerian tablets contain the secrets of our alien past?
Civilization began like this due to a direct intervention by extraterrestrials visiting from another planet.
There is a doorway in the universe. Beyond it is the promise of truth. It demands we question everything we have ever been taught. The evidence is all around us. The future is right before our eyes. We are not alone. We have never been alone. In the heart of the Middle East, there is a region known as the Fertile Crescent. It is believed to be the very first place with organized farming, in which humans cleared and modified vegetation to grow crops. Within this region was Mesopotamia, where several of the world's first known civilizations emerged thousands of years ago.
In
ancient Mesopotamia, you had gardens, you had control of water. Now it's completely different. Now it's arid. You look at that place and think, well, wait, what was this? The climate was different. The vegetation was completely different there.
Often called the cradle of civilization, Mesopotamia was the home of the Akkadian Empire that arose in 2334 BC. The Assyrian Empire that began in 2025 BC, and the Babylonian Empire, established in 1894 BC. For centuries, archaeologists thought these were the earliest peoples to inhabit the area. But in the 1800s, ancient clay tablets were discovered that would dramatically alter the established timeline for human civilization.
In the 19th century, it was a time of great exploration in Mesopotamia, and they're finding these cuneiform tablets, and there were various languages involved with these tablets. You had Akkadian, you had Assyrian, you had Babylonian, but in the mid-1800s, began to notice there was evidence of a much older script, and this was very important. It meant that there must be some other earlier civilization.
In 1869, more than 2 decades after Edward Hinks discovered this unique cuneiform language, archaeologists gave it the name Sumerian. This was based on Akkadian writings that referenced the land of Sumer, which scholars believe to be the place where the mysterious language originated. Then, in 1877, at the ancient site of Gursu in present-day Iran, 9 massive stone statues were found, all depicting a king named Hudea, who ruled over 4,100 years ago. Engraved on each of the statues was Sumerian writing, indicating to scholars that these were the first depictions ever found of a Sumerian.
The discovery of the Gudea statues at Gursu was definitive proof that Sumerian cuneiform text came from a lost civilization. And the fact is, people have been discovering Sumerian structures and artifacts and crediting them to other civilizations. So now they knew there was a civilization called the Sumerians. But it wasn't until the 1920s that thousands of artifacts and cuneiform text had been discovered, they realized how far this civilization went back.
In 1928, an article appeared in the Scientific American magazine with the subtitle, "Who were the Ancient Sumerians?" No one knows. But after nearly a century of collecting clues, archaeologists had determined at least one indisputable fact. The Sumerians were the earliest civilization ever discovered, emerging around 5000 BC and predating all other known civilizations by at least 2,500 years.
The Sumerians disappeared from sight entirely. They were extinct, like the dinosaurs. And the only reason that we know about them today is with the advent of archaeology, when people excavated in the Middle East and they found evidence of the Sumerians and their archaeology and their writing.
Once archaeologists became aware of the Sumerian civilization, they launched major excavations in Iraq and began to discover that the Sumerians were responsible for many world-changing innovations, like the wheel. The first stone potter's wheel with an axle was found in the Sumerian city of Ur and dated to 3129 BC. This eventually led to the first wheeled vehicles.
Most of the things that we take for granted, the Sumerians invented. That's why they're so crucially important. The Sumerians are key in writing. The Sumerians are key in mathematics. The Sumerians are the ones that invent the plow. They're the ones that first start to work copper. They're the ones that first understand how to smelt metals.
The Sumerians also built some of the first known pyramidal structures.
When it comes to the Sumerian ziggurats and the temples they constructed, constructed, most of the construction was made of mud brick. And so much of this is either washed away or been buried over time. There are elements of the temple, such as the giant statues, which have survived. They are made of stone, and some of them are in amazing condition.
According to mainstream historians, the first ziggurats were built around 4000 BC, predating the earliest step pyramids in Egypt by 1300 years. But perhaps even more impressive is that the Sumerians designed these structures by using an advanced counting system.
One of the first civilizations to really implement mathematics was the ancient Sumerians. And the interesting thing is they used mathematics on a base 60 system, that's called sexagesimal, as opposed to the decimal system with 10 that we use today.
It gives you much more flexibility in the use of numbers than if you just use a decimal system. And it led to all sorts of extraordinary discoveries in mathematics, in astronomy, and other things as well. For example, they could make accurate plans of a major building to scale, so they could calculate how many bricks they needed. In fact, they had a very modern approach to the practical problems of, for example, architecture and calculation.
While much has been discovered over the past 100 years about the Sumerians and their accomplishments, the origin of this highly developed culture remains a mystery.
What's remarkable about the Sumerians is nobody knows where they came from. We don't know who they were. The ancient Sumerians had technology, they had science. This is even thousands of years before the great rise of the civilizations in Egypt. Where did this knowledge come from? How did they acquire such profound information?
What could explain how this mysterious group of people so rapidly advanced from hunter-gatherers to form the world's first civilization? According to ancient astronaut theorists, the answer can be found by examining the recently translated Sumerian tablets that describe otherworldly beings who descended from the sky. When archaeologists began uncovering Sumerian relics in the 19th century, they knew nothing about this long-lost civilization. Artifacts offered key clues about the Sumerian culture, and many of their structures, which were made from mud bricks, had almost completely eroded. But fortunately, what did manage to survive the ravages of time were thousands of clay tablets containing Sumerian writing.
The Sumerians had a fully developed phonetic language that they had written on clay tablets in what's called cuneiform. Cuneiform comes from the Latin cuneus, meaning literally wedged. And what they did is they had reed styluses that had a wedge shape, and they would use wet clay and imprint those into such a way that it would be writing.
One of the great things that the Sumerians did was precisely writing with a stylus in clay and then firing the clay so it becomes a brick. And over the centuries, that brick becomes essentially stone. And so unlike papyrus that gets damaged, we find out all the time about papyri that get discovered and we can't open them. They're too fragile. That's not the case with these tablets.
The first tablets were discovered before archaeologists were even aware that there was a Sumerian civilization. But linguists received an important tool to help decipher them in 1850. British archaeologist Austin Henry Layard was leading excavation efforts at an ancient Assyrian palace. Some of the tablets contained not only the mysterious writing that would later be identified as Sumerian, but also Babylonian cuneiform next to it, which linguists had deciphered a few years earlier. Finally, scholars had what they needed to translate the unknown language, but it would be several more decades before they could effectively read the texts.
It wasn't until the early 20th century that we could cuneiform tablets. And so we went for a period of many thousands of years not knowing about these people. Then suddenly there's an explosion of knowledge about them in the 20th century.
The ancient Mesopotamians, they used those clay tablets for all sorts of documents, private, permanent, long-term and short-term, and we can read them today as if they'd just been written.
Researchers discovered detailed business ledgers, official government correspondence, and even medical texts. But most interesting to ancient astronaut theorists is a set of 7 tablets known as the Enuma Elish that describe powerful beings who came down from the sky.
The Enuma Elish consists of 2 different books, and in both books it speaks that long ago the gods created humans in order to spread knowledge here on planet Earth.
The Enuma Elish is a very important creation myth, and it indicated that these gods, what they call the Anunnaki, which quite literally means from the sky to the earth, came to create man in their image.
The Anunnaki are the founder gods of their civilization, and they were masters of the arts and sciences, bringing civilizing qualities to this part of the world.
So for the Sumerians, their knowledge wasn't self-derived. Their inventions, their great things were not of their own design. They were taught by the gods.
The Anunnaki nurtured the Sumerians to create this great civilization. But who were the Anunnaki? Were they extraterrestrials? That's what the Sumerians are saying.
Could it be that the Anunnaki were not gods, but otherworldly visitors? Ancient astronaut theorists say yes, and suggest further evidence can be found in a recently translated Sumerian tablet that sheds new light on a famous story of the Bible. Dr. Irving Finkel, one of the world's foremost experts on cuneiform writing and a curator at the British Museum, publishes a translation of a Sumerian tablet that dates back 3,700 years. The text contains a passage that is nearly identical to the biblical story of Noah and the Great Flood.
Now, anybody who's ever read the book of Genesis and knows about the flood there with an ark and Noah and the animals of both genders and so forth is astonished when they read the Sumerian text for the first time. Because it's a funny thing, they are the same story. When this tablet came across the desk to me, it was one of those heart-stopping moments. The tablet is at least 1,000 years older than the story in the Bible. So, of course, this means that the Sumerian story and the biblical story are inseparably bound together. There's no doubt about it.
The tablet deciphered by Dr. Finkel is part of a Sumerian story known as the Epic of Gilgamesh, whose protagonist is believed to be based on a historical king who ruled in the 3rd millennium BC.
The oldest story in the Western world is the Epic of Gilgamesh. This is a story that's at least 4,000 years old.
It covers a lot of things, but among other things, the restless search for immortality and the fact that man is deprived of immortality.
In addition to descriptions of a great flood, the Epic of Gilgamesh also includes the story of the Anunnaki and their relationship with humankind. According to the text, Enlil, who is the Anunnaki king, is in conflict with his brother Enki, who is the creator of the first humans.
Enki is seen as benevolent and an advocate for the advancement of humankind. But Enlil is seen as sort of militaristic and anti-human. And so throughout the Sumerian epics, there's this continuing battle between these two opposing forces, these brothers.
The two brothers have very different thoughts about this new human race that is rapidly multiplying. King Enlil wants to send a great deluge to Earth to destroy humankind, which he sees as getting out of control. But Enki fights to save the civilization he had helped to create.
In the story, we're told that Enki takes aside one of the human beings and tells him to build an ark and to take them to safety.
According to the Sumerians themselves, there's this other civilization that's pre-flood, and it had all of this knowledge as well. They had writing, they had the wheel, they had mathematics, they had all these agricultural sciences too. But the flood wiped out these people. What was left were the Sumerians.
After the flood, it was said that the gods imparted specific knowledge and wisdom and teachings to certain Sumerians to go and restart civilization. And this is where the whole Sumerian culture is said to have emerged from.
Could the fact that the same account of a great flood appears in both the Hebrew Bible and a Sumerian story written at least 1,000 years earlier support the notion that this was a real event, one caused by otherworldly visitors? And if so, who were these beings? Perhaps further clues can be found by examining an alternate translation of the Sumerian tablets that reveals incredible and highly controversial details about the Anunnaki. New York City, 1976. A controversial book is published called The 12th Planet, which contains a new translation of ancient Sumerian tablets. Its author, 56-year-old Zecharia Sitchin, is a Sumerian researcher and their gods, the Anunnaki, are far more profound than mainstream scholars suggest.
Zecharia Sitchin was in a unique position, being raised on the Hebrew Bible, being able to speak ancient languages, and specifically being able to translate cuneiform script. He was able to deduce the story and tell us what's the meaning behind a lot of these tablets.
My friend Zecharia Sitchin was a brilliant man, and the idea of the Anunnaki in his meaning were the teachers from outer space. The Anunnakis were extraterrestrial visitors. They were here and they created humans according to their own image.
In Sitchin's interpretation of the Sumerian stories, after the flood, the Anunnaki return to the earth, but they start to take a sort of a step away from humanity. In fact, they start to vanish from the story. But they leave behind teachers who instruct humanity in the various arts and sciences and rudimentary knowledge about civilization and how to conduct themselves. And this, according to Sitchin, is the origin of the Sumerians. This is where they got their knowledge. This is why they're the first with all of their discoveries and inventions, and it comes from the Anunnaki.
While the Sumerians themselves identified the Anunnaki as beings who came down from the sky, most scholars interpreted them as fictional characters. But Sitchin claimed that the texts are clearly historical accounts of extraterrestrials that the Sumerians encountered, and he says they even specify what planet these visitors came from.
Zecharia Sitchin postulates that the Anunnaki were actually ancient astronauts coming from a planet he called Nibiru, a planet that was out of our vision, and that it was on an elliptical trajectory, that it only came by Earth every 3,000 or so years.
As Sitchin anticipated, when he introduced the world to his controversial translation of the Sumerian creation story in the 1970s, the academic community was quick to dismiss it. His critics claimed that a planet with an elliptical orbit like Nibiru could never exist in Earth's solar system. But 40 years later, in 2016, astronomers at Caltech announced that they had found evidence of a new celestial object just beyond Pluto.
The recent discovery by two astronomers at Caltech is incredible. They find evidence that in our solar system, there could be a planet X that goes around the solar system perhaps once every few thousand years in a highly elliptical orbit.
While astronomers have yet to confirm the existence of Planet X, some researchers believe Its theoretical location and orbit align exactly with what Zecharia Sitchin claimed to find 40 years earlier in the ancient Sumerian tablets. And another discovery in the 1980s echoed one of his even more profound theories.
A pillar of Zecharia Sitchin's hypothesis was his belief that the Anunnaki had genetically altered the human genome around 250,000 years ago. Now we have discovered something quite remarkable. Scientists looking into the human genome discovered a genetic alteration that fused two of our chromosomes into one very important chromosome around 250,000 years ago that suddenly unlocked human potential, gave us our human abilities, including the ability to do mathematics, to produce art, to do science.
Might the discovery that the human genome underwent a major change 250,000 years ago help to validate Sitchin's translation of the cuneiform tablets? Could the Anunnaki have played a role in creating humans as described in the Sumerian texts? Ancient astronaut theorists say yes, and suggest this also lends support to the notion that human DNA was manipulated by extraterrestrials.
It's amazing to see that somewhere this new genetic makeup began, and there is nobody before that had this. So how did this all happen?
A group of extraterrestrials arrived on our planet, and one of our ancestors, call it an ape or whatever, it doesn't matter. They took a few cells, they changed the DNA code in the cell. Because of this artificial mutation, we are breaking out of the family tree. This is handed down in Sumerian cuneiform. It is always a question of translation. How do you look at these things?
Could Zecharia Sitchin's translation be correct? Were the Anunnaki real extraterrestrial beings who helped the Sumerians develop their civilization and also taught them about the creation of humankind? And if so, is there any visible evidence to support their stories of alien visitation? Ancient astronaut theorists say yes, and point to a site that contains the largest megalithic stone blocks ever discovered. Southern Iraq, 2022. Archaeologists from the British Museum are excavating the ancient site of Gursu when they uncover ancient walls made of mud bricks. It would soon be determined that these walls were part of two temples built roughly 4,500 years ago to venerate the Sumerian god Ningirsu.
They announced the discovery of the Lord Palace of the Kings and the White Thunderbird Temple. Now these are mythical sites that have been looked for generations. These were only recorded in tablets and text previously. And the whole Thunderbird mythos is related to Ningarsu.